Hello, fellow homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer, and welcome to Miles Away Farm. I am going to make a couple of different batches of fridge pickles today, refrigerator pickles. And these are the super easy way to use up extra cucumbers. I happen to have a lot of cucumbers. None of these cucumbers in here are actually pickling cucumbers. They are slicing cucumbers. Some are fresher than others. The super fresh ones I'm probably gonna put aside and just give to people. I give a lot of these away this time of year. These are pretty good. But some of them have been sitting for a little while, and it's a good opportunity to turn them into fridge pickles. This is a Japanese variety. I'll put all the names up on the screen. This one is a Bet Alpha, I think, from Baker Creek. And then these are lemon cucumbers, and I grew up with these. It's an old heritage variety. I love them. They do not get bitter in the heat. And you notice I have these in a plastic tub with a sealing lid. This is the way to keep cucumbers from getting super soft super fast. The cucumbers that you get in the grocery store they've either been waxed with food grade wax, or they have been wrapped in cellophane. You'll see those English cucumbers wrapped in cellophane a lot. And it's because cucumbers are 96% water, and so it does not take very long for them to dry out. We'll see how I end up here, if I need another one or not. And so if you keep them in a container that actually has a lid that seals, but no standing water inside that container, they will last so much longer. I find they last at least a week without getting soft. Here's the lid to this. And then obviously keep them refrigerated. They go in the fridge. But this basically traps the humidity in so that the humidity is really high, and it makes a huge difference in terms of your cucumbers lasting. If you're making canning pickles, you can hold them in a saltwater brine. There's information on that. I'll put a link below. I think it's the National Center for Home Food Preservation that talks about that. But you can, if you don't have a lot of pickling cucumbers and you're, needing to get enough to do a batch of canned cucumbers, you can hold them in a cold saltwater brine. So putting it in the fridge, but the saltwater, and that helps them stay crisp. Honestly, I think keeping them in a box would work just as well. I haven't actually tried that. I didn't grow any pickling cucumbers this year. We're not huge pickle eaters in this house. Mostly me. My husband doesn't eat hardly any. He really doesn't like a pickled cucumber. He loves a pickled jalapeno. And so I mostly just make this for when friends come over as something to nibble on. You can see this one has a little bit of damage. This is just scarring from probably where it was growing, where it got rubbed in the wind against the vine. Completely harmless. There's nothing, it's not disease or anything. That's just wear and tear. This one is really big. We'll see what this looks like inside. It might be too big to actually pickle. So what I'm doing now is cutting off both ends. Cucumbers have an enzyme in the blossom end. That's the blossom end. This is the stem end. You can see where the stem broke off here. Blossom end is the end where the flower used to be. In fact, that one still has the blossom on it. And the enzyme will make your cucumbers get mushy. And so if you're actually canning pickling cucumbers, be sure to trim off the end. I just cut off both ends because I think it's easier than trying to figure out which end is the blossom end when you're in a hurry. But that's the number one thing you can do with actually water bath canning cucumbers to make sure that they don't get mushy. There are some other tips and tricks. Again, I'll put a link to the National Center for Home Food Preservation. They suggest pasteurizing your canned cucumbers rather than boiling water bath canning them. It's kind of a 201 canning because you have to hold the water at 180 degrees for a half an hour, and that can be a little tricky to do on a home stove, and you have to have a thermometer. But it works better for them not getting soggy when they're home canned. I just don't, because we don't eat a lot of pickles, I just make fridge pickles, and you don't have to mess around with any of that stuff. Fridge pickles are Basically, you make a brine, you put the pickles in the jar, you pour the brine over the pickles, you put the lid on, you throw it in the refrigerator. And they're good, depending on whether you've cut the pickles up or you've left them whole. They're ready to eat within a day or maybe a week later if they're whole pickles. But they stay crispy because they never actually got boiled. And they're good for, you know, I think sources will tell you a week. Other sources will tell you up to a month. Honestly, I have had fridge pickles in my fridge sometimes for a year. If you've got the room, they last a very long time. And you just, again, you can take any recipe for pickles in one of the tested books and turn it into a fridge pickle by just following the directions and then not actually canning it. So that's basically what I'm doing. I made bread and butter pickles earlier this year, and I've given away some of those, and we've eaten some of those. They're actually probably my favorite pickle. I'm not really a dill pickle girl. I don't love dill. But today I'm going to make a sweet pickle, and I'm also going to do a mustard pickle. And I haven't done mustard pickles before, so that's a new recipe to me. I got some new canning books, and so I'm playing around with some different brines. But pickles are super forgiving. You can do a lot of different things with spices where you just change out the spices. The salt and the sugar that's in there is for taste. It's not for preservation. And so you can make a sweet pickle, you can make a savory pickle, you can alter the amount of salt. The vinegar is what's actually keeping things preserved. I'm using a mandolin to slice these just because it's super consistent. And you can, this is adjustable, and so I can make these as thin or as thick as I want. This is a little tricky because it's a funky shaped cucumber. And obviously you want to be very careful as you're doing this to not accidentally slice your fingers. I'm trying to straighten this as I go, and so I've got one end that's going to be slightly thinner than the other. I think I'm going to need a second bowl. But yeah, I spent a lot of years trying to get pickles that stayed crunchy after being water bath canned. And I finally just gave up. They don't, I know that I've done the pasteurization. It is better. That does help. But we just don't eat that many pickles. It's just not worth the hassle. And so, yeah, a few fridge pickles in the summertime, and then we're done. The other thing I like about doing a fridge pickle is I can use a slicing pickle for this recipe. I could not use this slicing pickle if I was going to water bath can it. It would just turn to mush. They're not nearly as firm as a Kirby or a pickling cucumber. Kirby is just a name for a type of pickling cucumber. And especially because I didn't even grow pickling cucumbers this year, it's really nice to just be able to use these regular slicing cucumbers for pickles and not worry about them getting mushy because I'm not actually water bath canning them. I did just see a really cool recipe from, I forget which YouTuber, I'll have to put a link below, for making lime cucumber lemonade or limeade, which I thought was a cool idea. And so he basically put a cucumber in a blender, blended it with a lot of water, and then strained out the pulp, and then added lime juice and sugar. And so it was kind of like a home version of a Gatorade. It was really cool. So that's probably something I will try before the season is up. He did peel the cucumbers, and so he took the skins off, and I think that probably helps remove any bitterness that might be there. All right, so we have a lot of pickles. I think I'm gonna kind of mix and match these since I've got two different kinds in here. All right, so I've got, and you can do this in wide mouth or regular mouth canning jars. I just happen to have, I've been canning a lot lately, and so most of my regular mouth canning jars are used because I've been stuffing them full of tomatoes. Wide mouths are nice because it's easier to get the cucumbers out too. And so I am literally just gonna, I got way more than I need here. And this is a Weck jar, and I've always coveted these. I think they're so beautiful. And I finally just recently splurged and bought myself a small set of 3 different sizes of Weck jars. I'm not planning on actually water bath canning in them, but I think they're just a gorgeous jar for kind of homestead stuff. And so it was a treat for me to finally buy a few. And you can actually can in them. They do in Europe all the time. And I guess it's just a slightly different process. I assume it's similar to using the reusable canning lids, which I've used before, the Tadler lids, or I think there's another brand that's out now. Might have to do 1 quart jar just because I've got so many here. And I'm not trying to cram, 100,000 cucumbers in here. I'm just trying to make sure there's not a lot of big empty space. Not worried about trapped airspace, because I'm not water bath canning these. These are not forever shelf stable. They are just gonna be snacking with friends. One of the other tricks to getting a crunchy cucumber, if you're doing water bath canning, is to use a product called Pickle Crisp, and it's calcium chloride. It's totally harmless, and it's what every commercial cucumber or commercial pickle on the shelves uses. And you can buy that. I've never seen it locally for some reason. I don't know why places that carry canning stuff don't include that. Although I bet it's in the kits. I bet those open a package and make pickle kits probably contain it. But you can order it off of Amazon, which is what I did, and it lasts forever. You use about 1/8 of a teaspoon per jar, and so it's a tiny little amount. But it helps with keeping things firm as well. It's amazing how much information and debate there is about how to make crispy pickles online. Everybody wants a crunchy pickle, and when you're starting out with something that is 96% water, that's a big ask. That's a lot that you're asking. That 4% that's left over that is cellular matrix to actually maintain intact and not fall apart. All right, I'm gonna go get a quart jar and see if I can get the rest of these in a quart. All right, 1 quart jar. Maybe give that a quick rinse. There shouldn't be any dust in these. I tend to store them face down, but just because we can. And turns out chickens really love cucumbers. My donkeys like cucumbers. And we have some cattle that are in our back pasture that belong to a friend, and they also like cucumbers. So, too many cucumbers, they go to the critters, and everybody's still happy. So I don't feel guilty about not using every single cucumber I have. All right. Once hot brine is poured over these, they will shrink a little bit. But I think we're there. I think that's about as good as we're gonna get. It's always weird to try to pack things that are this shape into jars tightly. All right, I'm just gonna call this little bit that's left compost. I could make it cucumber salad as well, but I have so many other cucumbers right now that I don't really need to save them. All right. Fun. I thought I'd show you guys my walk-in cooler. You're probably not going to be able to hear me in here with the noise. Things are shifted around in here a little bit because we were having problems with the air conditioner icing up, and I needed to be able to get up in there, and so normally this shelf is not this cattywampus. But this is a small walk-in cooler. We insulated the heck out of this, and then this is just washable board, and it's run by a coolbot. So this coolbot is a small little computer that helps take a regular air conditioning temperature down to 38 instead of the lowest usually these can go is 60. And so you can basically turn a room into a walk-in refrigerator for a couple $1,000s. And because I sell produce for farmers markets and things, that's what we use this room for. And then in the spring, I use it as, I turn the air conditioner off obviously and put a heater in here, and I use it to start my seedlings. So it works as a seed starting germination room as well, which is great. But this is where the cucumbers live when I'm not doing something with them because I don't have room in my regular refrigerator. All right, we're gonna start out with mustard pickles. And again, this recipe is new to me, and I'm adapting this recipe on the fly. The original recipe, which is meant to be canned, calls for putting pickling salt on everything and letting it stand for an hour, and then rinse or draining, trying to get some of the moisture out of those cucumbers. That's to help them stay a little more crispy. I don't really care because I'm not gonna can these, and so I'm gonna skip that step. I am gonna have to figure out how much sugar to add though, because the sugar is in that step, not later, and we're gonna want some sugar in there, or some salt. So we need dry mustard, turmeric. This calls for red bell pepper. It also calls for onion. I'm not going to worry about either one of those things. I'm just going to kind of work with the mustard side of things and not do the rest of it. Normally these would be very, very sweet. It's 3 cups of sugar, 2 cups of white vinegar, a half a cup of water. Yeah, we'll try it. First time out, it's always good to follow the recipe, at least fairly closely. But these are going to be a very sweet pickle. And the original recipe says 14 cups. Each one of these pints is 2 cups. So that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I'm probably not going to do all of these in this, and so I'll probably have a little bit of extra brine left over. I'm not going to worry about that. Sugar is fairly inexpensive, although not as inexpensive as it used to be. The beauty about refrigerator pickles is they're super forgiving. And so you can really, you know, I'm definitely kind of just on the fly here, and that's all right. It's not going to hurt anything. So tablespoon of ginger, teaspoon of turmeric. Took me years to figure out how to say that. I used to always say it wrong. And if you're ever wondering, turmeric is related to ginger. And these are old. I meant to use them for something and they didn't, but that's what turmeric looks like when it's in its fresh form. And so these are turmeric roots. Kind of fun. It's becoming more common to see those at the grocery store. And then I need a 1/4 cup of dry mustard, which is the equivalent of 4 tablespoons. And I actually make my own dried mustard by just buying mustard seed and grinding it myself. And so this is home ground mustard. And it's pretty old. I'm not expecting it to have a lot of bite. Okay, and we need a 1/2 cup of water. Okay, so I need 2 cups of white vinegar. And vinegars in pickling recipes are interchangeable, unless the acidity is different. And so all Most vinegars are standardized to 5% acidity. I don't know if you can see that. So if this was apple cider vinegar, also standardized to 5% acidity. Red wine vinegar, same thing. The only one that isn't is rice wine vinegar. Rice wine is 4%, so it's different. But if I wanted to make this with apple cider vinegar instead of white vinegar, or if I wanted to use red wine vinegar for some reason, I can do that. They're all interchangeable in pickling recipes. All right, we're gonna put a little low heat. Get this stirred up and dissolved. And then the original recipe called for, I think, a 1/4 cup of salt put on the pickles and then letting them drain. I'm going to kind of assume that a lot of that salt would have drained away, so we'll figure out how much salt to put in here. Maybe about a tablespoon. I don't think we want to do a lot. And if I wanted to rework this recipe with less sugar, I certainly could. I would just add more vinegar to balance that volume out. I'm going to try making it the original full sugar way this time just to see how they taste. Any pickle recipe that is at least 50% vinegar and 50% water is generally considered safe for fridge pickles. I wouldn't do less than that. So more vinegar is fine, less vinegar is not okay. So you need a 50-50 mix of the vinegar and the water to get enough acidity in there. Since I'm standing here stirring this, I'm going to turn this up a little bit. Because the original recipe called for bell pepper and onion, I might slice up a bell pepper and an onion and just see if I can like put some slivers of that down in the jars to get that flavor profile without fussing around with a lot of other stuff. All right, I think that's about as dissolved as that's going to get. I'm just going to turn the heat down so I can do other things here. Yep, I have a homegrown white onion here, so I'm just gonna do a quick sliver. Mostly right now I'm really flush with onions and bell peppers, and so it's an excuse to use some of those up, which is not a bad thing. Homegrown onion, real food comes dirty. These were picked on a day when the irrigation had been running, and so they're a little bit muddy. We'll just cut around that bit. I don't need a lot here, just a few slivers. All right, I'm gonna assume that these are gonna be the mustard bottles. So we'll just stuff a little bit of mustard down, or a little bit of onion down in there. I just went to see Shakespeare in the Park here locally, and they did As You Like It. It occurs to me I should call this video As You Like It Refrigerator Pickles, because I'm just winging it. I know I'm going to have enough acidity for these to be safe, and that's the only thing I'm really concerned about. Other than that, it's all just what flavor do I want. Might as well put these forward so that I'm not reaching so far. All right, let's put a little bell pepper in there too, or sweet pepper. I am so produce flush right now, it's ridiculous. There's a really funny meme that I saw years ago that says, God help me be the person I thought I was when I bought all this produce. And that's kind of how I'm feeling right now. God help me be the person I thought I was when I grew all this produce. I've got a lot. This is a Carmen sweet pepper. So it's called a bullhorn style pepper instead of a bell pepper. Still very sweet, but they don't tend to get sunburned. They don't have the big rounded shoulders the way a bell pepper does. And so they don't catch the sun in quite the same way. And so they are really nice if you struggle with sunburn on your peppers. And so that's the main reason I grow them. But they are also completely delicious. That's really a good sweet pepper. And I'm just putting a tiny bit of this in here. I don't have a lot of room in these jars. So just to pick up that flavor profile that they were clearly aiming at when they designed this recipe. There's onion and pepper in my, or bell pepper in my bread and butter pickles as well. Okay. Now we're just going to wait for this to come to a boil. For all that herby goodness to get happy. I'm going to taste this. At this point, mostly you just get the sweet. Nothing's really heated up yet. I think I am going to do a tablespoon of, and this is canning and pickling salt. It just means that it doesn't have iodine in it. You can use any kind of salt you want as long as it is iodine free. This is handy. It's cheap. I buy it and use it for a lot of things, including brining. But don't use regular table salt with iodine. The iodine is fine safety-wise, but it does discolor over time. And so your pickles won't look as good. Okay, we'll come back when that's boiling. All right, our brine has officially come to a boil. Almost boiling over because I was looking away for a moment. A lot of sugar in there. And we are just going to ladle this over our pickles. Having a canning funnel is always handy, even if you're not actually going to water bath can these. We'll see how we do. This recipe originally makes 7 pints. And I have the equivalent of 5 pints. So I should have plenty of extra brine. And I'm kind of stirring this before I scoop it, just so that all that spice that's in there stays suspended, so that I'm not ending up pulling all the spice off of the top layer where it's floating. So keep things moving. I was just reviewing, I have a bunch of different canning books, and I was just looking at a lot of traditional pickling recipes, cucumber recipes, and because I'm going to do the second batch of sweet pickles. And almost every one of them starts with cutting things up and letting them sit in salt water, cutting things up and putting them in an ice bath for 24 hours. It's just like there's no quick pickle recipe. It's like all of these steps in order to try to remove some of that moisture from your pickles. And I find that really frustrating. I realize, well, one, they don't explain it. They don't tell you why they're doing that, which is maddening to me. I knew this didn't look like enough brine. We're going to just come out close here. But yeah, if you're wanting to make pickles and there's it's a 13-step process to make them, it's kind of a bummer in a small home kitchen when you're busy. And so it's the other reason I really like refrigerator pickles is they're quick. You don't have to soak and drain anything. You can just make your pickles. And yeah, is your quality going to be as perfect as if you did all that other stuff? Probably not. But for me, in terms of time savings, it is definitely a worthy trade-off. Because this recipe is so sugar and vinegar heavy, if I was out of, I have just enough brine. Look at that. That's beautiful. If I didn't have enough brine, what I would have done was just added a little bit of extra vinegar, because it's a pretty heavy sugar recipe. All right. So I'm going to put lids on these just as if I were going to water bath can them. So I'm going to wipe my rims because they're probably going to be sticky if I spilled any of that brine. Some of these pickles are floating a little bit, which is the problem with a wide mouth jar, is there's no shoulder there to kind of hold them under. But once these have cooled off and the lid has stuck a little bit, I will just flip them over and they'll be fine. These are ancient canning lids that I picked up somewhere, probably at an estate sale. And I don't know if I trust them for actual canning because they're really old and I don't know how long they've been sitting, but they're perfect for a project like this where, in fact, I can just flip those right now. And this is an instance where I don't have to worry about finger tight. I can actually really give this I can give that a good solid twist when I put that lid on there. There we go. So we have 4 jars of mustard pickles. And I think, you know, as I perfect this process, because this is really kind of something I'm just starting to do this year a lot more, I think I'm going to try to perfect a bit of a master brine, where it has, like if I want to do a sweet pickle, here's a master brine. If I want to do a more sour pickle, here's a master brine. And then I can just play around with spices instead of trying to adapt all of these different recipes that have a million slightly different variations in terms of how much sugar and how much salt is in there based on whether they were soaking the pickles ahead of time or not. I just got a new, it's this Ball Blue Book, all new book of canning and preserving. And they have a refrigerator pickle in 4 easy steps, where they come up with a master brine and then they just play around with the spices. Pardon my phone going off there. And I like that idea. And so I'm basically going to follow their refrigerator technique, but play around a little bit with the brine, because all of theirs are more savory. There's a little bit of sugar in them, but sometimes you want a good sweet pickle. And so I will probably come up with 2 different brines, one that's more sweet and one that's more savory. All right, you guys, so for this second batch, I'm gonna do more of a sweet pickle. And on this one, I am adapting a recipe from this Ball Preserving and Canning book for cucumber rings. The brine on this is 2 cups each of water, vinegar, and sugar. That seems like a good place to start. I'm going to switch it up and use apple cider vinegar on this particular one. You get a slightly fruitier flavor when you go with apple cider vinegar. So I've been growing out these lettuce seedlings and thinking, you know, it's now the 29th of August, and thinking it was going to cool off and I'd be able to plant them out this week. And we have 3 more days of over 100 degrees. I am so over the heat of this summer. Ugh. It's just, we never have 100-degree heat this late in August. But, you know, we do now. All right, 2 cups of each. So I love things that are easy ratios to remember. So 2, 2, 2, 2 cups of sugar. My kitchen smells really good, you guys. It definitely smells like vinegar and pickles. I'm just going to use this same unwashed whisk from the other pickle brine. Don't care if there's a little bit of mustard and ginger in here. I'm going to want some salt. And on this one, I think I'm just going to put the pickling spice directly in the containers with the pickles. And I have a mixed pickling spice. The recipe originally came from Michael Ruhlman, and I now have my own version that is adapted from this and some other things, but I'm trying to use this one up, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. It's got a bunch of different things in it. I will either print or link the recipe below in the description. Lots of bay leaf, mustard seed, dill seed, probably celery seed, allspice, some clove, so a little bit of a bunch of things. I'm just going to do a teaspoon each and 2 teaspoons in this, maybe a teaspoon and a half in this bigger jar. It's metric, so it's not quite a quart. This brine, this master brine, is similar, less sugar, but calls for a tablespoon of salt. So we're going to try that. We're just winging it, you guys. It's all experimental. So this one, obviously less sugar than the one we just did, and more water. So this is an equal amount of water and vinegar. That's as low as you want to go in terms of acidity. But we'll give it a try and see what we end up with. Yep, mostly sweet, a little bit of tang, or a little bit of salt. I like that apple cider vinegar. I think that's a nice touch. Yeah, I think these are going to be good. And these are not going to pop the way you're used to a canning recipe popping, because this lid is just screwed on. I'm just kind of giving them a shake so that everything loosens up in there and gets well distributed. Because we didn't brine and drain these cucumbers, they are going to get off quite a bit of moisture. And so that's going to dilute our brine a little bit. My rough rule of thumb when doing pickles this way, where I'm not starting with a known amount, is to assume that I'm going to need half as much brine as the volume. So if this is a pint, I'm going to assume I'm going to need at least 8 ounces or a cup of brine to cover this. Same thing, and then this is a little bit bigger. So I'm probably going to have some leftover brine, we'll see. I didn't last time, but I should need about 4 cups of brine total here. It's a way of getting you in the ballpark so that you're not making way more brine than you need. Wonder how long ago it's been since Ball did that. Not that long. I remember the design, but it's kind of fun that they're a little bit older. All right, now we just got to wait for our brine to come to a boil. All right, our brine has come to a boil. And we're just going to ladle this over our second batch of fridge pickles. This is a 6-ounce ladle, by the way. I have an 8-ounce as well. Sometimes it's handy to actually have a volume that you know on your ladles. My gosh, that jar is pretty. Oh yeah, I think we're going to have plenty of brine. I can smell all of those pickling spices waking up. Don't need much in there. Smells awesome. All right, so those are full. And again, we're gonna just give everybody a bit of a wipe. Make sure our rims are clean. And you guys, I'm going to do some additional research and I'll post it if I get an answer. I'm going to contact one of my go-to websites that has great advice on canning and safety and ask all of that typical like salting and draining that you see in recipes for pickles. Is that just to try to make them more crispy? Or is there actually, are we trying to reduce the water and that factors into how much vinegar is in our brine? Because it does occur to me that if I'm using a 50-50 vinegar and water mixture on these, but I'm not brining my pickles, there's a lot of water in those pickles that's going to dilute that brine. And is that a safety issue or not? Because I'm now probably less than 50% vinegar. It's a valid question. So I'm going to see if I can get a good answer to that. We're going to eat these so fast, I'm not particularly worried about it. But I'm wondering if you, when you see all of that stuff about draining or leaving in ice water overnight, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is that in order to reduce that 96% water amount? And is that taken, is the brine that is with those recipes, does that take that into consideration? Okay, so there you go. So now we have 4 jars, 3 pints and 1 quart of mustard pickles. And then we have 2 pints and 1 quart of just a sweet pickle with a typical pickling spice mix. And these, because they're sliced, these will be ready to eat within 24 hours. These are refrigerator pickles. They should be stored in the refrigerator, not on the counter. And so make sure you keep them refrigerated when you're not munching them down. All right, it's the next day. I thought it's in the late afternoon and I'm feeling a little snacky. Thought we'd test out our refrigerator pickles. So I have the mustard pickles on the left, and these are the sweet pickles on the right. And you're gonna get a little bit of a vacuum seal there just because that brine was warm when we poured it over, and then as it sits in the fridge and cools off, it creates a bit of a vacuum. So don't mistake that for preservation. Seals on jars do not mean that the food is safe unless you've followed a tested recipe. I see that mistake fairly frequently with new canners who think that a seal means it's safe. You could put anything in a jar hot, put the lid on and let it cool down and it would seal. So left side is the mustard and ginger. I can see where they're gonna go. Really good crunch. I don't know if you can hear that. Super crunchy because they're just a refrigerator pickle. Quite sweet. The mustard is not super strong, but it's a really nice balance. And now the sweet. Oh, very different. So these were more acidic. This brine was less acidic. And then for spice in this, I just used a pickling spice. These are not as sweet. I'll have to look at the recipe, but clearly more dilute. They're really good though. You get that mixed pickling spice flavor which has got a lot of bay. There's mustard, there's dill, but there's also baking spices like clove and cinnamon and allspice. Yeah, those are both really good. Very different recipes. This one is definitely sweeter. And just more, weirdly, because it's more acidic, kind of more mellow. This feels a little bit more assertive, but yeah, excellent, excellent pickles. And I did email a friend of mine who is an expert in canning and food safety. She works for the county extension office, and just asked her about fridge pickles. And she said, as long as you've got a 50-50 vinegar brine, you should be fine regardless of whether or not you soaked them and salted them ahead of time, or whether you just poured the brine directly over the pickles. So that's good news. All that brining is really about trying to maintain crunch in canned pickles, rather than for safety, in order to try to, I was worried it was about removing moisture. So yeah, totally, I'm going to call that a success. So they're both really good. Give them a try. Play around with your own versions and let me know what you think.